I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to helping you open up more opportunities in your life through success in tech sales and the pursuit of self-development. And speaking of opportunities, there's a mentor of mine that told me once, all opportunities are tied to people. And that mentor is here with us today. The legendary Thom Singer, one of my greatest mentors I've ever had. Thom, thanks for joining. How you doing today?
Chris, happy to be here.
It's so great to have you. Guys, I want to lay out a roadmap for the conversation. We're going to dig into the power of networking and how to intentionally network to land a job, specifically in tech sales, and how to intentionally network to open up more opportunities to close business when you actually land that role in tech sales. But before diving in, I wanted to talk a little bit about mentorship because Thom's been an incredible mentor to me. So we're going to dive into that in a second. But I will say before we officially start, make sure to give the like button a love tap because the YouTube algorithm loves that too. And we'll show this video to more people who could benefit from the message. And subscribe to the channel for more amazing interviews with people like Thom. And trust me, this is not the last time he's going to be on the channel. So Thom, talk a little bit about the power of mentorship. Why is it important?
Well, anytime you're trying to do something, whether it's building a career in tech sales or whatever it is you're pursuing, you're probably not the first person to ever go down that road. So if you can find a mentor who's willing to give his time or her time to you to help just let you know some of the stories of how they bounced along and what they went through, it's going to clear away a lot of the roadblocks for you. However, there's a couple of things. Number one is not everybody knows what it means to be a mentor. Not everybody's willing to do it. So you might have to kiss a few frogs along the way because you're going to find people and you're going to say, will you be my mentor? And they're not going to know what it means. Or you're going to run into all these people who want to monetize everything. They're like, I'll be your coach. I'll charge you $10,000 and blah, 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 blah. You know what? There's a lot of really good people out there who will help guide you and share from their heart. You don't have to pay for everything. And so the first thing is that look for people who've been down the road you want to go down and, just look to learn from them. Look to ask advice, ask questions. However, if you're going to have a formal mentorship thing, you should have some ground rules around how often you're going to talk, when you're going to talk, what types of things you're going to talk about. And then here's the other thing. If you've ever been mentored in your life, and I was very fortunate, I had some people who opened up a lot of doors for me along the way. If you've ever been mentored, you have to realize that maybe not right now, because maybe you're a little bit younger, but at some point you're going to have to pay it forward. You're going to have to pay it back to other people along the way. So that's why people like yourself, my friend Jake, my friend Nick, people who have said, hey, would you be my mentor? The reason I say yes is people said yes to me. And I'm surprised how many people who reach senior levels aren't willing to give of their time because they're like, oh, I'm too busy, or that person just wants to pick my brain, or worse, I'm going to try to monetize it. And the truth is people opened up their hearts, their ideas, their Rolodexes for you along the way. You need to plan now that when you get to the stage that you can give back, that you're going to.
Hey, and I'm going to give Alex Lee a shout out. Alex, thanks for showing up. Alex is someone that I've been fortunate to be able to mentor, and he just got a job at Snowflake. Marquee data is the new oil.
Nice.
And Snowflake is the king of the data category in data analytics. There's some other good companies like Databricks as well. So Alex, thanks for showing up. And one thing I'd say as a mentor is that it is such a privilege to be able to contribute to someone. And when someone like Alex actually applies the advice and produces amazing results, that's the greatest gift you can give to a mentor. And Alex, you heard it from Thom, you're gonna have to pay it forward and lift others up along with you. But don't you think, Thom, I've applied your advice, and thanks to you in large part, I passed 2,000 subscribers. And thanks to the audience as well. Des just showed up. Des, thanks for congratulating Alex and for being here. You're awesome.
So you bring up a really great point, and that is if your mentor gives you advice, you've got to report back. And that report back may be that advice wasn't right for me, or I tried it and it didn't work, or I tried it and wow, it's really working. But so often people ask for advice, do nothing with it, and never even report back to the mentor. Oftentimes they never even call that person back. It's one meeting, they ask for advice, they don't follow the advice, and then they never even say thank you. So it's a two-way street, but I always say that the mentee, especially in a new relationship, the mentee has to drive that relationship, because when you first meet somebody, I can't call you up, Chris, when I first know you and be like, hi, can I mentor you today? That's weird and creepy. So the mentee has to drive the early stages of the relationship. Now, once you develop a good give and take relationship, if you haven't heard from the mentee in a while, then you can call them and go, dude, what's going on? But you really can't call somebody up who's called you once and be like, hi, I'm here to mentor you now. So the mentee has to drive that relationship. And part of the way you drive it is you follow their advice if it's appropriate, and then you report back. I agree with you.
Yeah, and shout out to Des for showing up. Des has been another incredible mentee, and she's on her journey. She's a massage therapist by day, which I think is the coolest thing ever. And she's a self-care queen, but she's looking to get into technology sales. And she's actually really investing in herself. She's doing an immersion sales retreat coming out to Austin. And hey, Des, maybe you could meet Thom. He's here in Austin with me, but at least we're going to get a cup of coffee. And one thing Des has done really well as a mentee is she's been curious to understand how she can contribute to me as a mentor. She's offered to help out with my website that I'm launching soon. Knock on wood. Counting on my editor. She's amazing, but I'm really dependent on her. And Des is like, hey, how can I help? I have some marketing background. So don't you think as a mentee, just because you're a mentee and the mentor seems like they arrived, like, can't you find ways to contribute to beyond just like even applying advice?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something a lot of people think, well, what can I give to that person? They're very successful or they're very senior. They've been down the road. You know what? There's lots of things. Number one, sometimes it's just fun to hang out with somebody who's younger, who has that enthusiasm and that spark for life. So sometimes friendship is giving back to that mentor. I mean, a lot of people I've mentored have become, really good friends of mine. And I think that's a great thing. But the other thing is that if they're still working and they have a business and they're trying to make money and do their thing, talking them up, doing things to promote that mentor. I do two things. One of the things I do is I work as a professional speaker for corporations. And when I first met Nick, this one guy, the first thing he did is he got me a paid speaking gig at his university. He was a student at the time. Well, I'll tell you what, he was on my radar, because he was like, wow, you really helped me. And then he talked to the dean about having me come in and speak and got a budget approved to bring me in to talk. Poof. He's on my radar screen. I'll never forget that because the average college student wouldn't have done that. So sometimes you can refer them to business. Sometimes you can just be their friends. And then other times, like, you've got a show, you brought me on this show, that could be a benefit. So yeah, I think there's lots of ways you can give back to the person who's giving their time to you.
Yeah, and I want to thank everyone who showed up right now. We got some people live for giving back to me. Your likes, your shares, those things, they might seem little, but they make a big difference. And so one thing I wanted to hit on with you, Thom, as we wrap up this mentor segment and start to get into networking, which they overlap because mentorship and mentee-mentee relationship is a form of networking, is how do you find mentors? And I will say before you answer, in my case, I proclaimed my dream. I'm like, I want to be a professional speaker. And what do you know? I told that to Jake Push, and he said, I know a professional speaker, Thom Singer. Let me connect you. Boom.
He actually thought you were pulling his leg because he's like, my mentor's a professional speaker. He thought you knew that and you were kidding him. But that's exactly right. If you're trying to accomplish something and you tell other people, hey, I'm trying to get a job in tech sales, or yes, I want to be a professional speaker, whatever your dream is, somebody might know somebody who's living that dream and they can make that introduction for you.
Yeah, guys, if you take anything away from this, there's already been a bunch of nuggets. So of course, make sure to hit the like button if you got some value already. Proclaim your dreams because they come alive in the listening of others. And a lot of people out there like Thom and like myself are willing to lift you up and willing to help. So I got to give Thom some credit. I didn't really share like his background and what he's done, but he was a top marketing guru and leader at a law firm, right? And then he became a professional speaker. It was his dream, and he's done it for over 20 years, and he's focused on networking in particular. And you've got a great speaker when you're making deep six figures year after year after year. It's not all about the money, but he's legitimate, not just someone going out there and saying, I'm a professional speaker. And he just recently gave a TEDx talk in Austin. Unfortunately, it's not out yet, but it will be soon. And I'm going to make sure that we share that and maybe have a Thom in the channel again. He's also the CEO of the Austin Technology Council. Freaking cool. And how did he get that opportunity? Through his network.
Through my network.
Can you tell a little bit of the story of how you got the opportunity? And then a story, I feel like you probably have many, on the power of networking.
Sure. So my background, as you said, is I was the marketing director for a law firm, then a bank, then a consulting firm that was selling into the tech community. And I was pretty well connected in the tech ecosystem of 15 years ago. And along the way, I started doing classes for the lawyers and the bankers and the consultants on how to network, how to get involved in the community. What did that mean? And how did it impact the bottom line of the firm? And how did it impact their long-term career? When I first started doing it, I thought, oh, they're going to hate this. And it was just the opposite. They liked it. The law firms, when I was at the law firm, they started sending me around to all 10 offices of the firm around the country to train the lawyers. And they started giving me to their clients when they were having a team meeting. And I remember being in the Washington, D.C. area, speaking for a technology company as sort of a gift. The law firm said, here, he can speak to your people. And the CEO is like, why don't you just do this? You're good at it. And I'm like, I don't know. I think you have to be famous or whatever. And the CEO said, no, my ex-brother-in-law used to be a member of a thing called the National Speakers Association. Go check it out. So I checked it out and I was like, oh, that's a whole industry. You could have a whole career going around and speaking. And I had a topic that people were interested in because it helped with career, it helped with sales, it helped with business development. Companies liked it. And so I worked towards that. It took a few years, but then in 2009, I went full-time doing that. And by going full-time, I wasn't focused on the Austin market anymore. So I spent from 2009 to 2020 traveling the country most of the time, about 100 nights a year outside of Austin. So my network had, I thought, gone cold. But during the pandemic, you could imagine a face-to-face industry like speaking at live conferences. I got hit pretty hard. My business went from pretty successful to zero pretty much overnight. And I was realizing that maybe I was going to have to go do something else to be able to pay the mortgage. I had a kid during the pandemic who got accepted to an Ivy League college, and that's not cheap. So I started thinking, I hadn't even raised my hand yet and said, I'm looking for a job, when people in my network started sending me a job listing for the CEO of the Austin Technology Council, which is a 30-year-old organization that is here to help bring the community together and help promote the causes of our tech ecosystem and to help companies find more success. And they wanted somebody to come in and reinvent the organization, the community, the collaboration, and the conversations that go around it. And that's what I teach. And that's what I've been doing, is talking about how do you build community. So there was a lot of synergies, but my network from 10 and 15 years ago, those are the people who kept sending me the job listing. And I knew some of the people from a decade ago who served on the board. And so that's how I got matched up. And I went through the interview process and I ended up being the victorious candidate. And for the last 10 months, that's what I've been doing, in addition to my speaking career, which I still have. And I speak a lot for the Austin Technology Council at, Chamber of Commerce type things or Rotary clubs or other things. So I get to kind of combine my worlds, which is fun too. But yeah, my role is to help promote the growth of tech in Austin.
It's pretty amazing. So you can use a network to get a job, and it could be years and years later. That's amazing. You can use a network to land a client. What other ways can you use a network to open up opportunities? And I got to say, are you willing to tell the Kate story? Because that can be pretty powerful.
Sure. Because if I say no, I won't tell it. I'm a dick. No. So I have a story that I tell when I speak to companies or at associations. And the punchline of the story is that when you're networking and when you're building relationships, this isn't just about getting the next job or getting the next sale. Anytime that you're dealing with another human being, another carbon-based life form, on the other side of that conversation, there's a person who has their own stuff going on in their life. And 21 years ago, when my daughter Kate was born, I had some pretty heavy stuff going on. Kate was born with a condition where the bones in her skull had fused together in the womb. And you're not supposed to have a solid skull till you're about 15 years old. It's 5 free-floating plates that allows your brain to grow and push your head out as you grow. In Kate's case, it was like someone had soldered it from soft spot to soft spot. And we were diagnosed late. You have to do the surgery where they remove the entire cap of their skull before they turn 6 months old so that the bones can grow back naturally. So you don't have to put in a plate or anything like that. So we were under a lot of pressure. We had about 6 weeks to figure all this out. And my wife would take Kate on an airplane. At the time, Austin didn't have the state-of-the-art Dell Children's Hospital that we have now. We didn't have the best doctors in the world like we do now. So we had to look outside of our community. And while we were looking around, somebody in my network called me and said that their first cousin was the top doctor or one of the top doctors in the nation doing this type of surgery where they would remove the skull of the infant and allow it to grow back so that they could have a normal shaped head and their brain could grow without pressure in that vault. And it was somebody's first cousin. And I knew who the doctor was. We'd read about him, but he was the top doctor. You couldn't get in to see him for 4 or 5 months. And we were diagnosed late. We had weeks. And my connection said, no, my cousin's expecting your call tomorrow. And so the next day I called Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. I asked for Dr. Meltzer. They patched me through to his nurse. And suddenly I was talking to one of the top 5 pediatric neurosurgeons in the world about this surgery and what we were going to go through. And he had pioneered a new surgery that instead of opening up the whole head, he would go in through small cuts to take the bone out. And it would be less invasive, less bleeding, less swelling, less time in the hospital after the surgery. And I remember asking him, well, how many times have you done this new surgery? And he said, 13. God, I wanted him to say 497. But there was something about his being the cousin of someone I knew through my extended network that led me to trust him, right? We had something in common. His cousin was somebody I knew. And because of that, we were able to take that trust into he's the doctor to do the surgery. And a week later, we flew to San Diego. We handed Kate over to the doctors at Rady Children's Hospital. And 3.5 hours later, they called my cell phone and they said the words I'll never forget. They said, Kate is going to be fabulous. And the bones grew back. We had to go out and visit this doctor for the next 12 years until her head was fully formed. But the fact that we had a need and somebody in our network's first cousin held the answer forever changed my life. Now, Kate is now 21 years old. She's a junior at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. Yeah, she's super smart and everything was really successful. And I'm sure if we had chosen another doctor, it would have been successful too. But it is a reminder that your network isn't just about business, that if you're connected to people, even through a business friendship, they can open up doors for the most important decisions that you have to make in your whole life.
Well, that is powerful. And we got a little look under the hood at one of Thom's speeches and a story that he tells that is pretty amazing. So Thom, thank you for sharing such a powerful story. So if we want to start building our network, could you offer a few pro tips, just fundamentals for us to get going and be effective in our networking?
So the first thing is we live in a digital world. And a lot of people, if they're under 30, they've grown up thinking that likes, links, shares, and follows are their network, right? They have followers on YouTube. You have 2,000 followers on your YouTube channel. Woo! No offense, Chris. Those aren't your friends. That's not your network.
Des and Alex are.
Same thing is true. Same thing is true with Twitter and with Instagram and with Facebook and with LinkedIn. A like, a link, a share, and a follow. These are great tools that can cultivate relationships. Sometimes you can meet people through these relationships that you take into real life. But the first thing you have to do, if you want to build a real reputation for your network, you need to get involved in either an industry association that is where you want to work or in a local series of organizations. So I always tell people that you should be involved with something locally. If you work in tech, your company should support the Austin Technology Council or some other organization. If you're in a certain industry, you should be going to the national conference for that organization, because showing up in person is the best way to build relationships, because no matter how much great technology we have, humans still build relationships through shared experiences. And while digital experiences are great, it's still the best to actually be in the same room. You can read people's eyes. You can get the gist of who they are. And sharing that experience of being live in person goes a long way. So the first tip is you got to show up. Second tip is you can't show up thinking, what can all these people do for me? Because if you walk in thinking, what can these people do for me? They didn't come to the event thinking, what can I do for Chris? They don't even know Chris. So when you walk into a room, don't think, who can I meet who can help me?
Yes.
But instead, show up willing to serve. The best thing you can do when you go into a networking room and there's 500 people in the room, you're not going to meet everybody. You're probably only going to meet 10 people max. So think of the 10 people I meet. What if I can meet someone I can help? So go in with the intention that you're going to serve others, because if you do that, you're going to develop a reputation where people want to know you because you're known for making recommendations, for helping others, etc. So, the first thing is show up. The second thing is show up to help. And the third thing is you got to follow up with people. Chris, the biggest mistake people make is they think, I met Chris, now he's part of my network. No, he's not. Meeting someone once does not make them part of your network. Do you know what meeting someone once makes them, Chris?
What?
It makes them someone you've met once. And there is a huge difference between someone you've met once and someone you've established a long-term, mutually beneficial relationship with.
So how many touches does it take, or follow-ups does it take, to actually build somewhat of a relationship where that person is considered to be within your network?
So you just asked that question and it reminded me of something that's going to prove I am old. Because the real question is, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? And nobody your age has any idea what I just said. But if anybody 50 years old just saw this,
I know.
they're laughing. That was a very popular commercial back in the
I've seen
1970s.
it.
Okay.
Good.
So there is no answer, right? Because the answer was the owl would lick it once, lick it twice, and then bite it to get to the center of the Tootsie Pop. So there's no answer to how many touches does it make. Networking isn't something you can say, first time you meet somebody, you shake their hand, you exchange business cards, then you send them a handwritten note, then you send them a LinkedIn request, then you make an introduction to them, and then they're going to buy all your stuff. It doesn't work that way. However, I can tell you from observationally studying this stuff now for 20 years, it takes 7 to 10 meaningful interactions with people, not before they're going to offer you a job or buy your stuff. It takes 7 to 10 interactions with people before they even notice you exist. So let's take something like the Austin Technology Council. If that's the group that you're participating in, we do a monthly lunch, a monthly breakfast. So if you're in Austin, you come to our monthly breakfasts. We do 12 of them a year at best. We're probably not doing them in December and July, so we're doing 10 of them a year. If you came every month and never missed one, you'd be there 10 times. If somebody else came to most, at the end of a year, they'd start to notice you. But what happens is most people don't come to everything that these groups do. They go to this group 1 month, that group another month, then they get busy and they don't go for 3 or 4 months. So they're like, oh, I never get anything out of networking. Well, no, because you're not there. You got to show up, and you got to show up all the time, and you have to have a 3 to 5 year plan of why you're participating in whatever groups you're participating in. Because 7 to 10 interactions before they notice you, then it takes more before you're going to be in a position to sell to them or get a referral or get a job from them. So networking isn't a verb. You don't go networking. Networking is a lifestyle choice. You decide, I'm going to be an active giving part of my community. And you look back when you're 57 years old, like I'm about to be, and you go, wow, people have really helped me a lot. But if I looked back at 23, I would have been like, oh, I didn't get anything out of participating in those types of things. So this is a lifestyle long-term play. However, I think because of coming out of the pandemic, so many people are trying to take digital shortcuts on all their relationships. If you show up, if you participate, if you help, if you're interested, if you ask interesting questions and you contribute to the conversation, I think it's your secret weapon, where if you do that a lot, you're going to look back in 5 years and people are going to go, why are you so successful?
Yes.
Because I invested for 5 years.
They say your network is your net worth. And that's so cliche, but it's true. And you really illuminated why that is. And I wanted to double click on the fact that you said, be generous, or it's not your exact words, but be curious about others when you network. Get off yourself and focus on them. One quick anecdote that a friend of mine shared with me. He's a founder that was going through this venture capital firm accelerator called Antler that I'm friends of. And he said there was a guy at an event that was a billionaire, and you don't come across those often, and people get big eyes and start freaking out. And people like him were founders of companies, and they were going in with the mindset, of course, can I win him over to get some funding for my business? But what he did instead was completely unexpected. He went up and said, how can I help you? And the billionaire was like, what? And then he gave him an answer. He said, I'm looking for a good engineer for my new company. And he said, okay, let me follow up. I actually think I have an engineer. He ended up connecting him with an engineer, and then he has the ear of the billionaire, and the billionaire wants to help him out. Isn't that powerful? So it exactly to your point, Thom.
Well, it's the way it works. And one of the problems is people show up, and I think it's worse today than it was 30 years ago. They show up in every situation and think, what's in it for me? I talked to a young entrepreneur, about 35 years old, has a big company here in Austin, and I was trying to get him to support the cause of the Austin Technology Council. And he looks at me and goes, well, if I gave you $2,500, how can you guarantee I'll 10X it in 12 months? And I'm like, well, that's not how an industry group works. And he goes, I don't do anything unless I know I can 10X it. I'm like, well, then you're leaving lifetime of money on the table, because relationships can't be 10X'd. But you'll get more than 10X out of some of the people you meet. You'll get 0 out of some of the people who you'll meet. But, it just takes that one person who opens up a magic door, but you can't predict who it's going to be. You could think, oh, it's that billionaire. And maybe in your friend's case, it is. But it also could be you meet someone who's, that billionaire's next door neighbor, and you help them, then they open up the next door to introduce you to the investor. So you can't prejudge. I get really upset when people who are like CEOs say, I only want to hang out with other CEOs. I don't go to industry events because there's riffraff, there's up and comers. I just want to go where other people like me are. Well, that's an ivory tower. If you just want to hang out with people who are just like you, you're missing out, because diversity is another one of the secret sauces in life. If you're hanging out with people above you, equal to you, below you, when it comes to the job titles, no one's below you. But when you're, if you're looking at the hierarchy, if you're thinking, I only want to network with people who are up the ladder. Well, guess what? What if everybody up the ladder looked at you like, why would I network with you? You're still an up and comer. You have to go both ways. And there's a famous saying that when you get to the top, remember, send the elevator back down and help somebody else get to the top.
I love that. Cheers to, sending that elevator back down where we can, and hopping on, guys, when you get that elevator coming your way. So when you get out there and you're networking in person, and maybe you're sharing a little bit about yourself because you're talking to a recruiter or a hiring manager to try and get a job opportunity, or maybe you're sharing about your company, like my 9-to-5 Best Friend Global, and what we do and how we help companies and who we help. You reminded me one time in real life when I kind of showed up and I throwed up. I was talking about Best Friend. I just shared. I was a little all over the place. I wasn't to the point. So do you have any coaching tips for myself and everyone out there? And it could be in either case when you're positioning yourself for a job and kind of you and who you are and your strengths, and or a company. Like how do you take advantage of that first impression and be crisp? And what does that look like?
Well, I think one of the mistakes that's taught to young people as they're up and coming is, both in colleges and in seminars that people go to, is a lot of attention is paid on crafting an elevator pitch, right? And most of the people listening probably know what that means. Some people may not. The idea is, if you and I got on the elevator together on the 30th floor of a building and I realized you could hire me, you could join my association, whatever it was, and I just flicked a little switch in my back and started to recite a pre-planned, quippy little thing about myself, like, hey, your company has a big meeting and you hire speakers? Hi, my name's Thom Singer. I've spoken, 1,200 times all over the country. I've written 12 books, blah, 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 just verbal vomit all over the person. When we got to the lobby and the doors of the elevator opened, Chris, what would they want to do?
Run away.
Run. I've never had anybody say, take you to the Starbucks in the lobby to learn more. Everybody says, run. So if you lead with yourself and your elevator pitch and why you're so great and why your company is so awesome and why if they don't buy from you or give you a job opportunity or whatever, they're missing out, they're going to be like, oh my God, just this verbal vomit, make it stop, and they're going to run. So instead of memorizing something about yourself, and here's my caveat, the idea of the elevator pitch is great because you should know how to clearly and concisely tell people who you are and what you do so well when they ask. But if you walk up and lead with, hey, let me tell you about my company, blah, 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 here's my business card, and just throw up on them, they're not going to be all that interested. But if instead you ask them open-ended questions about themselves, how did they get into their industry? What I always like to ask people, what's your biggest challenge in business this year? Sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they tell me and it's a big challenge. I'm like, wow, good luck with that. But sometimes they tell me their biggest challenge, like your friend who's like, I need to hire an engineer. I'm like, I know an engineer. This guy'd be great for your company. Can I make that introduction? And you solve their biggest problem. Now you're on their radar screen. So ask questions. Another thing, if any of your listeners live in Austin, Texas, this city has tripled. I want you to think about this because a lot of people don't realize the history of Austin and the tech community. Austin as a whole didn't have much of a tech community 31 years ago, and there were only 700,000 people in the metropolitan area. There's now 2.2 million people in the metropolitan area, and we have one of the most dynamic tech communities in the whole world. So a lot has changed in 30 years. But here's the thing, right, is if you don't know how the community got here, you think, oh, it just happened 10 years ago, or it's all startups. No, it's not. I mean, we're a very eclectic technology community. So you can't just make assumptions. So it's getting people, to talk. So the best question, if anybody lives in Austin, the best question is, how long have you lived in Austin and what brought you here? That's a great conversation starter because most people you'll meet weren't born and raised in Austin. And if they were, they're a unicorn. They've got an interesting story too. It's like, no way, you were born here and you live here. So get people to talk about themselves and their career journey, and they're going to like you more.
So ask open-ended questions to better understand someone, have the opportunity to connect. And, this is so relevant when it comes to the interview process for landing a job as an SDR. And we're going to start to apply networking now more specifically to landing an SDR role. You're going to have a cold call role play where you're going to have the chance to set a meeting with a stranger, a customer that you're cold calling. It's going to be the hiring manager playing that role. And you got to get their attention. You got to diffuse the sales defenses up front, get the agreement for maybe 20, 30 seconds to share a little bit of a pitch or why you're calling. And then, the way it goes with these hiring managers is they're not going to let you off on easy street. They're going to give you a couple objections. And I really think that when you get an objection, like we're all set, or we're, it's just, I think it's too expensive, things like that. Don't you think asking open-ended questions is also a great tool for overcoming objections to get to the source of the issue? Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, the more questions you can ask up front, the less objections you're going to have, because you're going to have the information of how you're going to present your strengths or your company's strengths. The other thing is, before you ever get into that meeting with the hiring manager, or in this case, with the person who could buy your product and service, you probably should have done your homework. Looked them up, found out who they are, what they do, where they work, where they used to work, who do you know in common, what groups do they support? And you know what? We have this tool called LinkedIn. You should never, ever, if you're looking for a job or if you're in sales and you're going to talk to a prospect, either on the phone or on Zoom or in person, you should never go to that meeting without dissecting that person's LinkedIn account. Yes. Now, I will tell you, not everybody fills out their LinkedIn account. Sometimes you're not going to find anything in common. Let me tell you a quick story of what happened to me one time. This is before I ran the technology council. I don't have a tech background. So I was up to be the keynote speaker at a technology conference for an association, a big national association that had full of engineers. And in fact, everybody in the association was an engineer. And the meeting planner had seen me speak at a conference and thought, wow, he talks about the human side of business. That's going to be a great talk for all these left brain engineers. But the CEO of the association, who made the final decision, didn't believe in putting anyone on the stage who was not an engineer, because he did not feel that his audience could relate to somebody who didn't have a technical background. So he told her no about me. And she said, really, let's just have a call with him. You're going to like him. His message is really good. And her boss acquiesced, and we had the call. So before the call, I looked him up. And on the call, I saw where he went to college. So we get on the call, and this was pre-Zoom. This was several years ago, before the pandemic. We get on the call, and it's just an audio call. She introduces us. And I said to him, before this meeting, I looked you up on LinkedIn. I see, because he lived in Washington, D.C., but I said, I see that you went to Carnegie Mellon University. This guy got so excited. He loved his alma mater. He was so pumped up. And he said to me, oh my God, did you go to CMU? And I said to him, no, all my money does. Because at the time, my daughter was a sophomore at Carnegie Mellon University. He laughed at that joke, and we talked about it. And he was older than I was. He talked about how inexpensive it was 40 years ago and how expensive it is now. Turned out that my daughter lived in the same dorm that he had lived in. And he was like, God, I hope they've remodeled it in 40 years. And we were laughing. We were talking about the great restaurants in Pittsburgh. We were talking about how beautiful the Carnegie Mellon campus is. And it's really small. You can walk around and get everywhere, but how Pitt is right next door. So you have everything a giant university would have, all the bars and restaurants and everything. We were laughing. About 20 minutes into the conversation, he goes, I have another meeting I have to go to. And he turns to his marketing and meetings person, and he goes, send him a contract. He's going to be great. We never talked about what I was going to say on the stage. Now, she had already told him who I was and what I did, but because I looked him up and I found something that we had in common, I fast forwarded our relationship. And so that's why the human side of business really matters. If you take the effort to learn about them, you might find something important that will fast forward that relationship. And that'll help you every time when you're trying to get a job or make a sale. If they feel a kinship with you, they're going to buy from you.
You know what? Out in the real world, helping people get jobs in tech sales, like Alex recently getting that job at Snowflake, we found that when we did research together as we were preparing in advance on the hiring manager or sales VP or the even like an SDR, and he reported back after he'd called out little golden nuggets, like, oh, I noticed you ran 80 miles a week running a D1, is a D1 track athlete at University of Colorado. That's incredible. I haven't run more than 3 miles. They always appreciate it so much. and it just opens up the floodgates for a connection. And that story you gave was really powerful. Do you think personalization is one of the most important aspects to connecting with people in networking? And are there specific types of commonalities and connection points that are more powerful than others?
Well, I think it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, but when you can find a unique commonality, something you have in common with them that you don't have with anybody else, it stands out and you have something to talk about. Me and this person who went to Carnegie Mellon, we had a connection because my daughter was a current student at that time, and it was his alum. He was an alumni and he loved the university. And I loved the university, and we had a great conversation about it. One time I was giving a speech. There were 4,000 people in the audience, and it was sort of a throwaway line. One of the board members of this association lived in the little town suburb of Los Angeles that I grew up in. And so while I was talking about something, I made a joke because I had met the board member, and I said that, he lived in Arcadia, California. And I said, and I looked at the audience and I said, I actually went to Arcadia High. And then I went on to what I was saying about this particular board member. And it was just a funny little throwaway line. But when I said, I went to Arcadia High, a woman up in the rafters, there were 4,000 people and it was the theater, screams out top of her lungs, "Go Apaches!" Because we were the Arcadia Apaches. Everybody laughed, but everybody thought that that was a plant because I was talking about finding things you have in common with people. And I said, name my high school. She screamed it out. And I said, this wasn't a plant. And I said, whoever you are up there at the break, come down to the front. I want to meet you. We have a unique commonality. After I finished my speech, 5 different people all came to the front. The woman who screamed out and 4 others, 3 of which had gone to Arcadia High School. All of them were younger than me, so I didn't go at the same time. And somebody who had lived in that town and worked for the school board. And so we ended up standing around for like a half hour talking. That night in the bar, we all hung out and took a picture together. We sent it to the alumni magazine or online site that they have. So when you can find that commonality, it fast forwards everything. So yeah, it matters, but you're not going to find it with everybody and you can't force it.
If you can't find a commonality, any thoughts on how to put your best foot forward to turn a cold connection, meaning like there's no warmth, there's no commonality, warm? Like what could you do, or what's your best bet to try and get, say, someone's attention for a meeting or a conversation?
Be curious about them. Ask them, how did you get into this industry? If you're going to work for a company, how did you get to work for the company? What's your favorite part of working for the company? Ask them questions that gets them to open up and share a warm part of their life. Be interested in them. If you go into someone's office and you see that they have fly fishing things all over their office, say, I know nothing about fly fishing, but clearly it's something you're interested in. How did you get involved with fly fishing? And they'll tell you the story. Nobody has like 500 tied flies, and hats and pictures of fly fishing in their office, who, when you say, how'd you get into that hobby, isn't going to tell you about it. You can get them to open up about something they care about, you're going to win.
Something we all care about on this channel is, again, landing that SDR role, right? And I want to paint a little bit of picture of the world that I'm in when I'm coaching and mentoring individuals to get their SDR role, right? There's a couple players that are out there, say at your target company, if you're trying to get in a Snowflake, as we talked about before. Again, shout out to Alex Lee on landing that role. You've got the SDR, your future teammate. And what's really interesting is you can learn about the day in the life and what it takes to succeed. And some of these SDRs get a $3,000 bonus, like my buddy Zach Watson, who I had on the channel, told me at QuickBase. He's like, I'll get $3,000 if I refer someone and they get hired. Others at MongoDB get equity, right? So there's an incentive. And I do think people want to help, but that's the SDR, right? They could talk about the role, day in the life, and refer you and probably give you some good insight on the process and how to be successful, interview questions, stuff like that. There's a recruiter, of course, that you need to, ultimately you have to connect with them over a screening call, and you could go to them and they could teach you about the opportunity and get you going in the process. And if you cold applied, I'm sure that, they'd review your resume. Then you've got the decision maker, the hiring manager, who is going to make the choice on whether you're going to work for them or not. And they have a big say. And usually you run into them in the second round interviews, the final round. And then there's probably like a VP of business development or a CRO. It depends on the scope and size of the organization, ranging from startups to enterprises. And they're not making that decision like the hiring manager, but they of course need to have a say and endorse you, and they can influence. And I could imagine you could go to them and make an impression, and they could fast track you in the process. I've also, Tom, heard of people who have gone in a startup to the CEO, cold called them, and they fast tracked them to the recruiter. So this is my expertise and bread and butter, but I wanted to get your high level thoughts considering all these types of players. Again, the SDR, the recruiter, the hiring manager, and then the executive that could influence, that's especially the sales one. Any just high level thoughts on approaching this networking dance and like the best place to start, or any tips?
Well, I mean, if you're looking for a job, the smartest thing to do is to get around people who work for the companies that you want to be in, because yeah, they might get an incentive for referring you. And we all know that $3,000 or additional equity. Awesome. But they might not every company gives that. But I will tell you, if you work for a company, you probably subscribe to the no asshole rule, which means you don't want assholes to work with you. So if you meet someone who's cool, who's looking for a job, and you know the company's looking to hire and you think they're nice, you have a reason why you want to bring that nice person to that hiring manager or to HR to get in. So the first thing is that network with people who work inside the company, regardless of their job, and ask, again, those open-ended questions. Don't be there talking about yourself. I mean, eventually, if you ask a lot of questions about somebody, they're going to say, well, tell me about you. And you can say, oh, I'm trying to get into a role like this at a company like yours, and then they'll be like, why? And then you have a chance to talk about yourself. But if you just show up and participate with them and share in the experience of being human beings at, whatever type of event you're at, then you're going to stand out from the other people, because a lot of people are just cold sending resumes. So if someone walks your resume in, I can promise you that anyone in the company who walks into their boss or their boss's boss or somebody in a different department and says, I met Chris at the Austin Technology Council. This guy would be perfect. You guys should move him to the top of the list. Any smart manager is going to say yes. Now, there are asshole managers out there who'll be like, we didn't find him. We have a process. They have to go through Indeed, whatever. Great. Yeah. That's fine. But most companies are made up of humans, and humans don't live in a black and white, you have to go through an Indeed, process. Humans live in a world where, is she that cool? Well, we should look at her, because humans want cool humans around them. So if you go out and you're an interesting person who is interested, then someone might walk your thing, and that's the way you're going to find the job. And here's the thing. You can look great on paper and someone else can get the job, because people make decisions with their gut. So it doesn't matter what the job requirements said. I was one time mentoring someone and they found their dream job, but the dream job description said bachelor's degree required, master's degree preferred. Well, this person had dropped out of college, but had that same job at a competitor for 5 years. And I said, I think the fact you've done the job for 5 years covers the bachelor's degree. And they said, no, right here it says 5 years bachelor's degree required. Well, it's true. If you just submit through the hiring channels, you're going to get bounced because you don't have that. But if a person who knows the competitor and realizes that you worked there for 5 years and you're good, they don't want you at the competitor if you're good. They want you inside. They'll circumvent the system, bring you in, then someone brings you in and talks to you in person. So I have a friend who is the chief revenue officer of a big company, and he used to run a division of an even bigger company. And there was a person he wanted to hire as a salesperson who worked for the competitor, but the guy didn't go to college. And his whole team said, well, you can't hire him. We have a rule in this company. We don't hire anybody without a college degree. Now, this was 25 years ago. The world has changed. A lot of companies are a little more flexible now. But my friend wanted to hire this person. So he met the person and he said, why didn't you go to college? And the person says, well, I was recruited by the FBI to be a coder when I was 17 years old, and I spent 10 years writing code for the FBI. And he was like, all these really smart people out of top colleges who just said, we don't hire anybody without a college degree. Nobody was recruiting them to be a coder at 17 years old. So he went back to the group of people and he said, how many of you were recruited by the FBI to be a coder when you were 17? And they're like, well, nobody. And he goes, yeah, we're not taking this guy because he chose not to go to college. And everybody was like, oh, well, but still. And then one person made an argument. There's more to college than just the degree. It's the socialization. It's the events that you have. So my friend, who was the sales manager, set up an appointment. And this person lived in Arizona near Arizona State. So he set up an appointment at a college bar across the street in Tempe from Arizona State. And this guy shows up and he's like, why are we meeting here? Right? 35-year-old guy talking to a 45-year-old guy. So why are we meeting here? And he goes, I just want to be able to go back to my coworkers and say, you've been to a college bar. And he went back and he said, okay, you guys argued socialization. Would you say part of that is going to bars and things like that? And everybody was like, well, yeah. And he goes, great. I just met with this guy at the college bar. He's been to a college bar. Now let's talk about how he helps our bottom line. And they ended up hiring him, and the guy was a kick-ass salesperson. However, the company had a rule, nobody without a college degree. It got circumvented because somebody asked him a question. Why didn't you go to college? Well, it wasn't because he was a screw-up. It's because he was above everybody else and got like a job of a lifetime at 17. So we have to remember that humans are making the decision, and that can go both ways. Humans can be stupid as shit, or they can be creative and gray area'd out where we're going to find a way to make this work if you're the right person. So if you're networking and you're a good person, you've got a good story and people find you interesting, you can get hired for a job you don't qualify for on paper. If we're just going through the system, the algorithms and the HR department are going to kick you out. That's why the people workaround is so important.
Here's the great news, guys. In my mind, the resume and what you look like on paper is the least important thing when it comes to success in tech sales. It's your character, your grit, your passion, your persistence, your ability to be proactive.
But you've got to get the interview.
And
they'll kick you out. If your resume doesn't meet the things, they'll kick you out of the process. That's why your network and somebody leading you in makes a huge difference.
And that's what I'm about to say, Thom. You're actually absolutely right. This is what it takes to succeed. These qualities, these intangibles, proactiveness, courage, persistence, coachability. And by networking, you can actually show your real world resume, show it in action. You could step outside the processes that are the norm and actually make your luck and make it happen. So Thom, I just think that you hit the head on the nail. And with that anecdote, it really illustrated the power of networking. And so I want to hit on, if you can't network with someone in person, it's not that you can't, but you're taking an approach of reaching out virtually, right? To an SDR, a hiring manager, et cetera. You have different channels of communication. You have email. And by the way, there's a great tool, Apollo, APOLLO.io, where you can get free emails. You can use the tool, plug in someone's name off LinkedIn and get an email and reach out. You can use LinkedIn, send a personalized LinkedIn connection request. Hopefully they accept it and continue on and have a conversation, a dialogue, or you could send an in-mail, right? Or you could cold call someone if you can get their number, and that's gutsy and it can be effective. Thom, what do you think, if it came down to virtually reaching out to people, are the most effective channels for networking, especially when we look through the lens of trying to get a job?
Well, I think communicating with someone you don't know via LinkedIn is kind of harsh, because I get something like 20 in-mails a day from people who want to sell me things I don't buy. Like, people are trying to sell me things to my association that my association doesn't buy. They don't even know who we are and what we do. So I don't even look at my in-mails in LinkedIn. If I don't recognize the name, I don't even look at it. So reaching out to somebody by phone or by email is going to be more effective, because I do sort of check out my emails much more than I do my LinkedIn in-mails. So email is a great tool if you can get their email. But here's the thing. You've got to be short and concise. One of the biggest problems is I get a cold email that's 19 paragraphs long. Yep, not reading it. But if it's 3 sentences long and it lets people know who I am, what I'm asking for, and then I'm asking for help without going into too much detail. So you got to grab them. If you're going to do a cold email, you've got to grab them in just a couple of sentences and let them know you're not asking for a lot of their time. You know, they're busy, but you're looking for you're looking for some information about the company, whatever. So, this is your expertise, Chris. I don't know exactly how to do it, but I can tell you right now, as somebody who gets a lot of inquiries for a lot of things, if it's long and doesn't make any sense, I delete it.
So I think you hit on some of the key points that apply to what we're talking about getting into tech sales. Be crisp and to the point. lower the commitment barrier. Hey, I'm not asking for a lot of time, and just be clear. I'm going to read off a note that is an example that I crafted to coach someone up on how to write to an SDR to try and get opportunity to connect with them and learn about the opportunity and maybe get referred. Now, I am a wordy guy. However, I put in a lot of thoughtful intentionality and I personalize. So sometimes I make up for it. But I'd love your honest coaching as the networking expert, Thom. And I think this will be a helpful exercise. So guys, this is an example message to an SDR at a company, Rippling. And the SDR's name is Nikki. And this is a real person, and I looked up their profile. I said this: "Hey, Nikki, I love your Mark Twain quote." Shoot. Take two. "Hey, Nikki, I love your Mark Twain quote on your LinkedIn profile. In quotes, the secret of getting ahead is getting started. Speaking of getting started, I've started the application process for an SDR role at Rippling, and I noticed you're a part of the SDR organization yourself, so I thought I'd reach out to connect. I'm excited about the opportunity because it seems like Rippling is in hyper growth mode with over 700 million in funding raised so far and has a great culture that is recognized by Forbes as one of the best startup employers in the US. And I'm confident that given my background in sales, my passion for technology, and shared values with the organization, I'll be an asset to the team. I'm sure you're super busy, but I'd love to connect to learn about your experience so far, what it takes to succeed, and how to put my best foot forward in the process. Could you squeeze in 10 to 15 minutes this week? Best, Chris." Thom, I'd love to get some feedback on that.
So, I think it's great. It was a little wordy. I don't think you have to quote everything that they've been quoted in Forbes, et cetera, because they know that. I think you could have taken some of that out. But for the most part, it was short. It was sweet. It let them know what I was doing. It asked for a few minutes, to talk about the thing. And you may or may not hear back from them. And that's okay. It's not that Nikki is a dick. It's that Nikki's busy, and that's not.
Anyways,
it's not their job. But if you don't try, the odds of Nikki taking your call are zero. Every shot you don't take is a missed shot. So I think doing that is a great idea. You keep it simple, you keep it light, you put it out there, but you also realize that not everybody's going to respond to you. Every now and then I get these inquiries, and then they send a second one and it's too wordy and it isn't anything I do. And then about the fourth one, they start getting nasty. Like, "You're ignoring me," and things like that. And somebody has coached them along the ways. Now I'm blocking them. So I think you have to realize that if you're sending some sort of a cold email and you don't hear back, and you do it once or twice, okay, after that, just let it go. It's not their job to care for you. But if you take the shot and the person calls you and helps coach you through it and you get the job, that's a victory. So I think you make the try, but don't think that they owe you anything, because they don't know you. They don't owe you anything.
When it comes to networking, it's like, what could go right? And what could go right is incredible. What could go wrong? Not much. You just end up where you started, but you got to shoot your shot. Wayne Gretzky says you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. But
I knew it was somebody who said that.
Yeah, and then I'm Mr. Cheeseball and cliche quotes, but coming at you with the quotes nonetheless. So there's a guy that I was working with, a really sharp guy, and he was like, "Oh, well," he was hesitant to network because he's like, "They don't want to talk to me. They're busy." So basically rationalizing, making excuses. What would you say to the person that's so hesitant and they're making up those excuses and basically not, that's preventing them from networking?
Well, we can rationalize all kinds of reasons not to do things. But if you're genuinely pure of heart, why not try it? And again, I'm going to go out on a limb. Most people aren't going to reply to you, but you just need one Nikki to reply to you. So yeah, I think you have to take the shot. And I think you have to start earlier than, "Oh, I'm applying for this company." I think years in advance, you're building your reputation in the community you live in. If you have a job and you have a national sales role and you live in Dallas and you're not networking with other tech salespeople and other tech workers in Dallas, you're like, "Oh, I got a sales job, but I don't sell to Dallas. I don't need to know these people." When you get laid off, and I hate to tell you, many of you are going to get laid off if you work in tech many times. It just happens. It's part of the thing. I talked to one person and, he said, "Well, but my company has $100 million in funding. The VCs wouldn't give it to us unless they thought we were going to make it." That's not the way VC funding works. They fund 12 companies knowing that one should make it big 5 or 6, they'll get their money back, maybe make a little bit of money, and they're going to lose the money they invested in a lot of the others. It's a numbers game. So just because somebody smart gave your company money doesn't mean your company's going public. It very much means your company could go bankrupt. It's the way it works. And so, you need to have, if you want to continue to live in Dallas, you need to have a network of people who work in technology, who know you, who like you, who trust you, so that when you get laid off, they can open up doors for you. If you're waiting until you have to have something to start the networking process, you're going to go thirsty. There's an old saying, dig your well before you're thirsty, which I think is pretty self-explanatory, that if you're living in the desert and you're really thirsty and you didn't dig a well, you're going to die. So same thing is true with your network when it comes to looking for a job. You should always be prepared for what's my next job. If you work in tech, if a recession comes and wipes out your company, when Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, there were predictions that like a quarter of all startups could have gone out of business if the government didn't step in and guarantee all the money that was in Silicon Valley Bank. That would have been a lot of companies going out of business if they couldn't access their cash. Now, that didn't happen. The government stepped in. The banking system is strong. But that could have gone the other way. If it did, and you haven't been networking for your next job, that would have sucked. So that's the thing, is you always want to be prepared for what's my next job. Even if you love your job and want to work there for the rest of your life, you've got to be thinking, if my job went away tomorrow, how connected am I? And if when I just said that, you pooped your pants, you need to get out and start networking.
Yeah, the network is such an asset that can be your security net in uncertain times, to catch yourself when you get laid off. And what you're saying is the key is to be proactive and start building it today. And it's not a verb, it's a way of life. So if you guys take anything away from this, every opportunity to connect with someone, even that grandma across the street, what if her son is a CEO at a company that ends up becoming your next employer? And so one other thing I would say, Thom, is it is a tough economic climate and layoffs are happening. And some people are like, oh, is now a good time to get into tech sales? I would say, yes, it's always a good time, because if you want to be in sales and entrepreneurship, you need to become the type of person that says, I can handle it. I can develop skills that are transferable, and I can develop a network that can catch me. I'll give a quick pause if you want to add anything. And I wanted to go back to the follow-up piece.
Well, I do want to add something to that is, times are tough right now, but I'm 57. If I go back 40 years to, the 80s, the times right now aren't nearly as bad as 3 or 4 other times we've experienced. About every 10 years, there's some pretty bad recession stuff that hits tech and everybody else. And so it can happen and it will happen. However, the stories of the companies that are born in the biggest downturns, the biggest, 2008, 2009, some amazing companies were founded. Same thing is true for people who move into tech sales. Some people will start their careers in the crappiest of times. And if they can survive that and grow their tech sales career, they're going to get good. But here's the thing you have to remember. You can't I heard the term base jumping the other day, which is people who get a really good base working for a tech company, they suck at sales. And before they get fired, they go out there and get another high base. Their base goes up. They go to another company. They spend a year and a half not making quota, and they go to another company and they get another good base. If you're going to be in tech sales, you got to sell. And I will tell you, if you're not in the top 25% of the salespeople in your company routinely, you're in trouble. But if you're routinely in the top, you're going to be able to get plucked away by bigger and better companies all the way through. So if you're really a producer, you will be rich and you will always have work.
Love that. This channel, it's really at the end of the day about creating wealth, both physical, actual monetary wealth, and wealth in terms of well-being and fulfillment. And that's really that the riches are a tool to create freedom. And this career path, if you can deliver, really opens up that freedom. And I love what you said about recessions coming and going. It's so important to have a long-term mindset and play the long game, because you've seen multiple recessions and they went away and there were booms, and then recessions came and it's just like the ebbs and flows of the ocean. So when we take a long-term perspective, it really can pay off. Our success, I almost would say it would be guaranteed. I have a buddy, by the way, Thom, go ahead.
I was going to say, there's one thing I've seen a couple of recessions in my lifetime. There's one thing that has followed every recession, and that's a boom. So just because we're having bad times doesn't mean we're not going to have kick-ass times tomorrow.
Boom, baby. I can't wait for that boom to come, and it will come. And so speaking of playing the long game, I have a buddy, David Tigas. Shout out to Tiggy. I call him Tiggy Azalea. But yeah, David Tigas, he worked with me at Google Cloud, and now he's at AWS. And he told me recently, he's like, Chris, I applied to AWS 17 times. And they're like, 17 times? Oh my gosh. He's like, yeah, I really want to work here. And he eventually got the job. So be persistent, guys. The CEO of Sun Microsystems, I saw an interview with him on Stanford's YouTube channel they have for the graduate students, the best CEOs in the world. And he said, with enough persistence, the impossible becomes possible. And that has stuck with me. So speaking of persistence, Thom, how much should you be following up when you're networking on LinkedIn and you don't, like, maybe you send a message like me and it was a little wordy. You're right. I could have taken out a little bit of the Forbes stuff that they already know, but whether it was more succinct or not, you send it, no response. How many times do you actually follow up when you're networking, say for a job opportunity?
You know, it depends on the situation. If you've met the person, you can follow up a few more times. If you've never met them, after a couple of emails, give them a break. They don't want to respond. They're busy, you know, so two or three times. And after that, don't become that person who's like, here's my 10th email to you. They've clearly, there's no love connection there. So, you know, but you want to be persistent. I mean, they say in sales that the average buyer doesn't buy until, I forget the number, but I'm going to make up a number here. The average buyer doesn't buy until they've been contacted like 7 to 12 times. I don't remember the actual stat, but it's somewhere in that. The actual salesperson gives up after 3 or 4 tries. So you've got to remember that persistence goes a long, long way. I mean, I do that as a speaker. There's companies I want to work for and they're, oh no, you're not the right fit. You're not the right fit. And I continue to send them things and I continue to ping them every few years. And then they hire me and they're like, oh, why didn't we have you years ago? Well, I don't know. You chose not to. But, you know, persistence is the key to the long-term game. And here's the thing. A lot of your listeners are younger. I'm going to be 60 in 3 years. And that sounds old, except all of you are going to be 60 in about an hour and a half. Here's the thing. Persistence is the key to winning in life. You just got to keep trying. You're going to get knocked down. You're going to fail. You're going to get fired. You're going to get laid off. Your company's going to go bankrupt. And you pick yourself up and you find a way to provide value to other people consistently, and you're going to have jobs.
Yeah, you know, I had Sally Doobie on the channel, and guys, make sure to check out that live interview if you didn't have a chance. And she's one of the most impactful women in tech sales. And, you know, obviously there's many rankings and things. Maybe it was LinkedIn Top Voice or something, but that's cool, right? And she works as the chief sales officer at the Bridge Group. And they did a data-driven study, and their expertise is on SDRs and inside sales reps, basically under the umbrella of sales development, trying to build predictable revenue engines for companies. And their statistic on follow-ups, Thom, is that you need 11 touch points as an SDR to get that first meeting.
That sounds about right.
Exactly to your point. One term I use is being pleasantly persistent. And I just, you know, it's, I think
pleasant is the key. Like I said, there's somebody out there teaching a lot of people that after the 5th or 6th one, you start being a little bit of a dick and making them feel guilty. I'll tell you what, when someone starts saying things that makes me feel guilty for not answering their cold email, I block them. So, you know, I think the best rule is don't ever be a dick.
If anything, guys, don't be dicks, right? Let's be pleasantly persistent. So I got a couple more things that I want to ask you, Thom, and then we're going to finish up the conversation. This has been one of the most fun conversations yet on this channel. So are there any other subtle LinkedIn hacks to play the long game and build and cultivate a connection with someone? And I'm going to throw a few at you, and maybe I'm stealing your thunder, right? It's like liking posts and making a thoughtful comment on someone you're trying to get who could help you get a job or a customer, or, you know, something like that, right? Like, what are your thoughts? Are there subtle ways to over time play the LinkedIn game and make an impression?
Yeah. And I've learned a lot of this from a guy named Richard Bliss. Look him up. He is brilliant when it comes. He actually goes into tech companies, because large tech companies like the Ciscos of the world spend over $1 million with LinkedIn getting Sales Navigator for everybody. If you've got a lot of salespeople and everybody has Sales Navigator, you're spending millions of dollars.
It's a great tool. I think it's actually one of the most fundamental tools to use.
Sure. But if you're spending a lot of money on LinkedIn Navigator, don't you want all your people to be using LinkedIn right? So they hire Richard to come in and teach them. But Richard's one of my friends. I've learned a lot from him. And the first thing is, are you posting on LinkedIn? So you want to post and position yourself as an expert. You don't want to be posting weird things. You want to be posting about what you're an expert in, what your company does so well, but only post like 3 times a week. There's people who post like 5 times a day. Their algorithm doesn't want that. LinkedIn isn't Twitter. LinkedIn is LinkedIn. They want thoughtful conversations. So post less, but make it like a few paragraphs long where you're educating people. You're not being salesy, but you're providing value in that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you want to comment on other people's posts, because if someone is posting, they want people to see it. And the algorithm gives more love, or whatever you want to call it, to posts that gets likes, shares, and comments. And the comment isn't just great post, because the algorithm knows that that's a cheesy post. The algorithm is looking for things where it says, hey, Chris, I really liked your post about your interview with, Bobby, blah, 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 blah. I really liked it when they said this and that. So if you go and leave a post on someone's thing, they'll read it. I can promise you, if anyone listening to this goes to my LinkedIn and leaves a thoughtful comment on a post that I've made, I will read it. I may not call you personally, but I will read what you said. So if you do that regularly, and don't do it every time someone posts, because that's stalker-y and weird, but if you're playing the long game, if every third or fourth post I do, you come in and add something thoughtful about what you liked about it, and then add your 2 cents, I'm going to start recognizing your name. And then when it comes time for you to send that cold email, I already know who you are. So leaving posts on people who could be buyers, who could be your potential next boss, who could be those SDRs that you want to help into the company. Again, don't be salesy. Don't be, hey, I want you to do this. Literally go in and add to the conversation. Do it occasionally, regularly, but not every time. Over the long haul, now I recognize your name, and I'm more likely to take that call. The secret sauce in this world of using LinkedIn is liking, sharing, and leaving comments, because that helps the other person's post get seen by more people.
Yeah. And guys, personally, I want to thank you for the likes, the comments, the shares you've given to my channel on YouTube or on LinkedIn. It really makes a difference for me. And you can apply that, with folks like Thom, or people that you want to be mentors, or potential customers, or people that can help you get job opportunities. As long as we're not going over the top and being to the point of being creepy, where just every day we're commenting, they're going to see it. And it actually is a way to benefit and contribute to them by getting their post more views. So Thom, I wanted to finish up with 2 more things, right? We both know the power of getting involved in organizations like Toastmasters, and doing things like stand-up comedy, which is really, I haven't done it yet, but you've done it, and it's really getting out of your comfort zone for most people. Can you speak a little bit to that? And then the other thing is that I want to finish up with a teaser for your TEDx talk that you gave that's going to be coming out soon.
All right, so let's talk about presentation skills. If you can present well, if you can position yourself when you are asked to make a comment, either in a meeting, when your boss says, hey, Chris, what do you think about this? If you can clearly and concisely add something smart, or when it's your turn at a conference to be on a panel or to be the featured speaker, if you can actually get up and present in a way where people want to lean in and listen to what you have to say, you're going to go farther in your career. So when I was 25 years old, my boss sent me to give a speech for him because he got called out of town. And I bombed it. I was horrible. I was a sales guy for this company, and I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never given a professional level speech before. There were like, 100 people in the audience, and it got back to my boss that I was like, unconfident, etc. And so he told me that didn't go very well, but he took responsibility because he didn't prep me. And he said, you need to join a Toastmasters club. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. Well, when I was 25, we didn't have the internet. This is the early 90s. So I had to actually write away or call a number, and they mailed me a directory for where the Toastmasters clubs were in Austin. And I went and showed up, and I joined, and the advice I was given was go every single week for 2 years. And I went every single week for 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, I was starting to get pretty good at it. Fast forward 5 years later, I came in the top 18 people in the world in the Toastmasters International Contest of Public Speaking. I was the runner-up for one of the 9 regions. 9 people went to the finals. So there were 9 runner-ups. So that's how I figured out I was in the top 18 in the world. And the guy who beat me in my region won the whole thing. So clearly, I could have been number 2 in the world. We don't know.
Oh, good point.
So throughout my career after I became a good speaker, long before I was a professional speaker. People, when I worked at the law firm, somebody said to me after a meeting, we were meeting with potential clients, and as the marketing director, I made a big pitch about why the firm was the best choice. And afterwards, one of the lawyers said to me, "Where did you get your MBA?" I'm like, "I don't have an MBA. I went to a party school. I barely went to college." And he said, "God, you sound like an MBA." Well, it wasn't that I sounded like an MBA. It's that I knew how to present when I was called on in a clear and concise manner. So if you can improve your speaking skills, it's going to help you go a long way. Go back 5 years from now, a friend of mine who's a professional speaker invited me to go with him. He's also a professional comedian. Invited me to go with him to an open mic night. And I thought I was just going to be there. This is about a week in advance. I thought I was just going to be there to watch him work on new material. How fun would that be? And he goes, "That's not what I'm inviting you to do. I'm inviting you to create a 5-minute stand-up set and get up on stage." And I'm like, "Oh no, I was 52 years old." I'm like, "That ship has sailed." I was a kid. I wanted to be an actor or a comedian, but I'm like, no. And he's like, "Come on, just push yourself out of your comfort zone." He goes, "Isn't that one of the things you teach people?" So I got up and I did it, and it wasn't great. It was funny, but it wasn't. Jerry Seinfeld would not have been worried about job security if he saw me do 5 minutes of stand-up. I wasn't that funny. But then I made the commitment that I was going to do 100 open mic nights. And in the past 5 years, I've now done 165 plus open mic nights. I've been a featured comic in several shows. I'm not going to get a Netflix special, but it's made me, who already was a paid professional speaker, it's made me better. And that leads into your question about the TEDx talk. In March, I was part of TEDx Austin, and I have given 1,200 plus professional level speeches in my lifetime. And this talk was the best talk I think I've ever given. I'm very proud of it. I've seen the video. I think that I got the message across. I think it was touching. I think that it made people think, and I think it will challenge people to be aware of some things. The talk won't hit the TEDx YouTube channel until probably mid-June, somewhere around there. They have to edit it and submit it. It has to be approved. But in about a month, it will be on the TEDx channel. It'll be on my website. Now, I was fortunate enough 5 years ago, I gave a TEDx talk in Kansas City, and it's a nice talk. I'm proud of it. It's good. But the delta over 5 years and 160 open mic nights, stand-up comedy is the hardest use of the spoken word. And what I've learned in the past 5 years is there's nothing that's scary about giving a speech in front of a bunch of business people. Giving a speech at an open mic night in front of a bunch of drunk comics, half of them are high, who don't understand why some almost 60-year-old guy is doing open mic night when they're all 25. They're like, who brought their dad? That's scary because they're not going to laugh. They don't even barely pay attention, but I get up and do it anyway. It's made me a better speaker. And if you were to go watch the TEDx talk from 5 years ago, which is currently on my website, and the one that's coming out next month, which will be next to it on my website, I think you'll see a delta from a really good speech to a really great speech. And the real difference is I kept pushing myself with the spoken word, even though I was already pretty good.
Thom, it's really helpful to get a sense of how open mic nights have really shaped your speaking and taken you to another level when you already were an amazing professional speaker. I can't wait for the TEDx talk to come out. What date in June does it come out?
That is an unknown, but my guess is somewhere between June 8th and June 30th.
Got it.
I made
and
that.
that's something, Thom, that I want to try out myself as open mic nights. And I think Des in the comments said maybe I need that. I think she was referring to open mic nights. Guys, at the end of the day, get out of your comfort zone. One thing I've learned from Thom is you said you're 57, Thom, and at 57, you continue to reinvent yourself and get out of your comfort zone. And didn't
I turned 57 in June, so I'm still 56.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you looked 48, but anyways.
Good call. See, kissing your mentor's ass gets you a long way. That's good.
Yeah. But didn't you set a goal for yourself and we'll wrap up the conversation with some calls to action, but that you were going to make, was it 50 plus the best years of your life, or what was that commitment?
When I turned 50, and I talk about this in the TEDx talk, actually, when I turned 50, I made a commitment that I was going to make age 50 to 75 the best years of my life. And many of them have been, but just because you declare, hey, I'm going to have a great time, doesn't mean it's going to work that way. Bad things happen to really good people. Sometimes things go awry. Your career gets thrown off. Your family gets turned upside down. There's all kinds of things that can cause you to have a little bit of trauma in life, but you pick yourself up and you move forward and you keep trying to make tomorrow better than yesterday.
I don't care what happened to you 10 years ago, 10 months ago, 10 minutes ago, 10 seconds ago. We can make our upcoming years the best years of our life. So cheers to us all doing that wherever
Don't
you're
wait
at.
till you're 50.
Don't wait till you're 50. And Thom, let's finish up with calls to action, right? Hey, guys, connect with Thom on LinkedIn. Leave a comment on one of his posts and he'll at least see it. And who knows, maybe you'll get connected and have a conversation. What's your website, Thom? Is it thomsinger.com where they can find your old TED Talk? And are there any other calls to action or final thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's thomsinger.com. That's THOMSINGER.com. You can find out about my speaking business there. You can see some videos, and certainly there's a drop-down menu. TEDx is one of them. There's also my 21-year-old daughter did a TEDx talk when she was 15, and that's actually on my TEDx page too. And the sad part is she was 15. She wasn't a professional speaker. She was better than me. But so that's on there as well. And then you can find me on LinkedIn. And if your company is in Austin, Texas, and you're not part of the Austin Technology Council, you got to support the future of Austin, man.
Yeah, guys. And if you're thinking about breaking into tech and you're open to making moves, if you're not already in Austin, consider hopping into the Silicon Hills, I think they call it, where Thom and I are at. It's an incredible community where you can really grow and meet amazing people and expand your network and create that freedom we talked about in tech sales. So guys, thank you so much for showing up. Sadiq, thank you for showing up and for the great comment to wrap us up. He said, this interview is excellent. And that's true. It is excellent because we have an excellent guest, Thom Singer, a personal mentor. This conversation is personal. Thank you, Thom, for contributing to my success and to everyone here's success through your insights. Guys, speaking of success, to your success in tech sales and in life, all the best. Happy selling, happy living. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers, y'all.